we await the full plan here from the GOP and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on what they're looking to put through in the next relief bill, one big name university appears to have budged on cutting tuition amidst a shift to teaching online classes in the fall. And it raises more questions about how students in all age groups, not just college years, should be thinking about the options on the table. For more on that, I'm excited to be joined once again by Cabot Phillips, campusreform.org editor-in-chief. And Cabot, I mean, it's Georgetown. I don't mean to build up the suspense here, but Georgetown's going to be cutting tuition for students not coming back to campus. But before we get into that move, just wanted to highlight, as it's a decision being faced by schools of all sizes right now, from college down to high school, even kindergarten right now, as we were just discussing. But the GOP bill right now seems to be tying more than $100 billion in aid for schools out there, half of which would be tied to them reopening. I'd be curious to get your take on kind of how all this thought is being played out right now, and then whether or not you think a one-size-fits-all plan makes sense when we're dealing with this pandemic.
Yeah, well, I was hoping that you would let the suspense build on Georgetown, and that may be the one to unveil that, but not even a drum roll, please, or anything there.
No, we don't have that.
But I definitely think that the one-size-fits-all approach just isn't going to work for a variety of reasons. The size of schools, the location of schools. A school in Montana obviously is going to be treated differently than one in New York, and so it doesn't make sense for there to be a one-size-fits-all approach. As far as the congressional bill, there's $100 billion there allocated. About $30 billion of that for higher education. And I think you would like to see as much of that money when it comes to the higher education space contingent on reopening as possible. Otherwise, I think you've got to do as much as possible to incentivize schools to get back open. And right now, if you're a university and you know that you're going to get couple, tens of millions of dollars from taxpayers, and it's not reliant on you actually opening up and offering residential courses, then where's the incentive for you to actually take that risk, to actually innovate, to bring students back? And so I think that needs to be the main approach here. When we see universities like Georgetown and like a few others, Princeton, lowering costs, some schools like Liberty, my alma mater, offering $1,000 credit to students and offering other kinds of housing credits to try and help. That's kind of just a reaction to market forces at play. So many students right now are expressing not any kind of interest in paying full tuition for full online courses. 70% of students say that they have not been satisfied with online schooling, and universities are responding to that, hopefully starting to realize that not enough students are going to continue paying tuition and footing the bill on a product that they view as inferior.
Yeah, and it seems like that's kind of the number that we're boiling down here. As you noted, Princeton disclosed plans earlier in the year to cut tuition for undergrads by 10%. Georgetown living up to the same cut in tuition here. It comes out to about a reduction of about $3,000. But I mean, is that fair based off what you're seeing in terms of the, I guess, fall in product as you're describing it here, in going to a college on campus versus just taking classes on Zoom? It doesn't necessarily seem the same. Is 10% fair?
Absolutely not. I think universities should be doing even more. The main reason they're not is because of financial incentives or the lack thereof in this case, because so many students have continued to pay that rate because they want to make sure they're still getting their degree on time. But I do think that if this continues, that more and more students are not going to apply, and the universities will have to lower prices even more, or at least that's what you'd expect to see. 1 in 3 graduating high school seniors has said that they would not apply to a college if they knew it was going to be all online. So you actually have another element here where universities are doing their best not to disclose that. We've covered this pretty extensively at Campus Reform. We're calling it the campus bait and switch, where universities are telling students one thing, getting them to sign, and then offering a completely other thing. So I think universities, they know that the product they're offering is inferior. Many of the professors that we've actually spoken to on and off the record have admitted that it requires less work of them when they're doing these Zoom lectures, and that, well, it's not really the same experience, and everyone knows that, but they're still getting the piece of paper. That's what universities are relying on, is that element of students feeling like they're getting a credential with their degree and not actually necessarily getting the in-campus experience. But I do think that in the next few years, we're going to start to see schools shut down if they don't start to lower prices, because that's going to be the only real outcome here, is that students are not going to continue to go along with this. And so as far as the 10% decrease, if that is commensurate with the service they're getting, it's absolutely not. I would say they should be cutting rates closer to around 75, 65%. Compared to full tuition.
I guess that becomes, the main question here is which schools are best positioned to do that. We already saw the backlash that Harvard was hit with here, even though it hadn't necessarily tapped the funds the president was talking about. But we did see a lot of the other schools come out and say, look, we're not going to take any money from the federal level. But when we think about what schools right now, public versus private, that might be hardest hit in what you're describing, if they are going to see students applying fall off, obviously that's where they make their money. So how should we be thinking about which ones might be impacted the hardest? I know that you guys have dug into that quite a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot to take into account as far as how schools are getting their revenue. You take a large state school in the South, for example, they're making tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars on their athletics programs. And that looks like something that's going to be cut. And so they're not going to be able to get the revenue from their football team. The University of Alabama, for example, that's the number one way they bring in money is through their football team. And so you've got schools like that, they're going to have to find ways to come up with because they're not getting that revenue. You've got other schools that are newer private schools that don't have the $40 billion endowment like a Harvard does. And those are the schools to keep an eye out for. The mid-sized private schools, they don't have the large endowments. They don't have the name recognition that some of the other older schools do. They don't have the alumni base they can tap into. Those are the ones I think they're going to start to teeter on the edge of going under. And there's going to be a whole nother debate going on in Congress about whether we bail those schools out. Whether you're going to see universities that are saying we're going to go under if we don't get this money. And I think that's going to be the new debate we see going forward in the next few years, because this is going to take a little bit of time to fully play itself out.